Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast.
Hi, I'm Paul Mooney of the Farmers Journal. I'm the Buildings Editor, and I'm here to talk about GLAS with the journal's CAP specialist Peter Young and the IFA's Rural Development Executive Gerry Gunning. So the GLAS scheme has now been approved by the EU and applications can proceed. There's about 1 month left to apply on the part of farmers. The department is hoping that up to 30,000 farmers will join, and I'm sure that many listeners at this moment are debating whether or not they should apply with their planners. Peter, if I can just ask you first of all, deadline, is there enough time left for farmers to apply?
I think there's enough time for farmers who want to apply. I mean, they have to contact an advisor, you have to get into the scheme through an advisor. So the first thing they have to do is go with their advisor, sit down and see is it right for their farm. Because in some cases, farmers are looking at the scheme, seeing their farm and saying, no, it's not right for me. But in other cases, they're being surprised actually how much money they can get quite easily in some cases.
Okay. Gerry, I mean, have we any kind of a plan B for your members if some guys cannot get a planner or can't get an application drawn up in time for the deadline?
The real issue for farmers here, is this is part of the Rural Development Programme. It's a scheme that's going to be here for a period of time. So therefore, I think, we're in a short window now. There has been an extension already, of course, but if people don't make it, I mean, we would look for a commitment from the Minister here now that he would open the scheme again in the autumn, because it is a 5-year commitment. It's a big decision for farmers because effectively they're locking part of their parcels and part of their farms into a different type of farming system than they have at the moment.
Okay, so you will be pushing for that in autumn opening of the scheme. But Peter, nonetheless, I imagine you would advise guys not to wait around to move quickly.
Yeah, particularly, I mean, the scheme is divided into 3 tiers for priority. You've got Tier 1, which is commonages, the ones who are going to get in no matter what. Tier 2 then, and Tier 3, which a lot of farmers are in, particularly a lot of dry stock farmers are in. They're the farmers, I think, which, if they're going to make a decision, they should go in this time around. They should get in before the 22nd of May deadline because they don't know what will happen in the next tranche. The priority could change. It could be more focused on Tier 1. So for farmers that are in that Tier 3, the lower category, I think they should get in this time around.
And looking beyond tiers, Peter, there are many technicalities with the scheme. One, for example, that I've heard you raise before is split parcels. What exactly is going on there?
Yeah, some farmers have, their whole farm is in one lippus parcel, which they have to identify. And they're finding when they go in and try to maximise payments, they're actually getting restricted because if they split that parcel, you can't get area base, which is the likes of the traditional hay meadow, but on that parcel you can't also do hedging. So it's actually restricting those farmers from getting the payment, and they're finding they're not able to get over 2,000 or 3,000. But if they went and split it this year in 2015 basic payment scheme, they could actually apply next year to get a higher payment for 5 years. They have to weigh that up and see what is better. It's like a bird in the hand and two in the bush. Do I go in now for less money or split the parcels and hope I can get in the future for more money?
Fair enough. And Gerry, I know that you and your chairman would regularly meet department officials on the scheme. Mm-hmm. What are you asking for now?
As Peter has outlined, there's been a lot of technical issues, IT issues or whatever, and I know there's constant dialogue also, of course, between planners and the Department of Agriculture, and there has been changes to the specifications, albeit minor or whatever. But I think it is a huge scheme. The objective is bringing 30,000 farmers in this phase of it. By 2016, it's envisaged that 50,000 farmers will be in the GLAS scheme. So there is a budget here of about 1.4 billion over the 5 or 6 years. The allocation would eventually go to 250 million euros per annum. So therefore, the Agri-environment scheme has to make a significant contribution to farm income, as indeed REPS did in the past. And I think that would be our kind of objective as we move along over the next year or two.
Gerry, guys who are currently in AS, for example, can they transfer or transform, as the technical word is, over to the new scheme?
Well, initially the Minister was saying no, now they can. I mean, he's now decided that all can move. AS 1, 2 and 3 can move. Of course, AS 1 are finishing, most of those farmers are finishing at the end of the year anyway, but AS 2 and 3 finishing at the end of 2016, into 2017. A lot of farmers in the AS scheme, they're maybe fearful that if they move to another scheme, they might have had problems with payments like they've had in the past, we'll say, with the early days of AS. So some people are moving. Other people maybe want to stay.
And to put you on the spot, guys, is the scheme as good, or can it be as good as REPS? Peter?
No, it's not going to be good as farmers look. I mean, REPS was a good scheme. We all remember REPS, but it's not as good as REPS. It's there. Farmers have to make the specific decisions for their farm, and see is it worthwhile for them.
Did you get as good a scheme as REPS, Gerry?
It would be very hard to replace REPS. REPS was there for 20 years. It was a very successful scheme. And I suppose we saw it the first when REPS finished at the end of 2009 in terms of applications. The last farmers came out of it at the end of last year. I think there's probably 400 or 500 still in the REP scheme, by the way, for various reasons. But it was very hard to replace REPS. EOS was a poor relation. This really is kind of maybe a continuation of that poor relation. But look, it's a scheme. It suits some farmers. Believe it or not, there are farmers where the EOS suited better than the REP scheme because you don't have to put all your farm in. You can take a specific part of your farm for various measures. But in general, I think it's not as good as REPs. There's no doubt about that.
No doubt many farmers were sad to leave REPs, and while EOS might have been the poor relation, GLAS hopefully will be a slightly better off relation.
Yeah.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Gerry. You'll find extensive coverage and advice from Peter and GLAS advisors at farmersjournal.ie.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
I'm now joined by our Agri-business editor, Eoin Lowry. Eoin, Irish Dairy Board, owned by Farmers and Co-ops, is the largest dairy exporter in the country. They've just changed their name to Ornua, and you're reporting on their results in this week's paper. How did they do?
Well, Paul, they did very well. They reported very strong results for 2014. Their revenue was up 10% to 2.3 billion and profits were up 23% to 28 million. It's a very big business. And they export 60% of our milk, and the role is to build profitable markets for the milk that we're processing.
OK, now there could be a 50% rise in milk output here post-quotas, and they're the ones who will be selling this milk. Are they up to the job?
I think they're very ready. It's a profitable company, although it is a low-margin business. They have been investing significantly with over 200 million invested in the last number of years, and they're also building a new Kerrygold butter packing facility down in Mitchelstown at the cost of 36 million.
A question I hear farmers asking, where is all this extra milk going to go?
Well, with quotas now lifted, look, this means that there's going to be extra milk produced within Europe. And demand is stagnant in Europe, so that means all this extra milk that's going to be produced needs to go outside the European Union. One of the key regions that the Irish Dairy Board are focusing on is China, alongside the Middle East and Africa. These are key growth areas, and currently China now is Ireland's second most important market compared to where it was in 2008 when it was 13th.
So we shouldn't be afraid.
No, I think it's very positive. They seem to be well set up. And remember, Kerrygold is the number one butter in Germany, and they also have the leading position of imported butter into America. So it's a good, positive story, I think, for the Irish dairy industry.
Thank you, Eoin. Now, let's move to New Zealand, where share milking has long been popular. That's when a farmer lets another one use his land, his buildings, and sometimes his cows in exchange for a share of the profit made from the milk. Mochra recently held a discussion on this type of arrangement in Portlaoise, and my colleague Aisling Hussey was there, and she met a couple from New Zealand who started off with zero investment, but now own their herd of 310 cows and a third of the farmland.
I'm Aisling Hussey, online journalist at the Farmers Journal, and I'm here with Paddy Kelly of Teagasc and Sarah and Kieran Tully, who are dairy farmers in New Zealand. So we're just going to talk about a few of the issues with share milking and how it can be applied to Ireland. So Paddy, you're going to kick off with a question.
Yeah, so we had a great discussion this evening, Kieran and Sarah, in conjunction with the Mochra Land Mobility Service. We had 35 farmers in, and we talked about share milking and the role it might have to play in Ireland post-quotas. So maybe you could tell us what is share milking and why might it apply to Irish dairy farming now in the future?
I think in terms of applying to Ireland, we see a land of opportunity here. A lot of older farmers, wealth and land, and a lot of younger farmers with enthusiasm and no wealth and no land, and there's a way that they could partnership together, whereas the owner still gets some profit from his land and the up and coming farmer gets to generate wealth for the future of Ireland dairying.
Okay, and maybe Kieran, you tell us about your experiences in New Zealand, your background, and what share milking has allowed you to do.
We've lived in New Zealand for 20 years since migrating from England, and over that period of time we've progressed through the share milking system, been able to build up wealth in terms of buying a herd of cows, and in 2008 we were able to purchase a piece of a farm on the Hauraki Plains in the North Island.
You've operated farms for farm owners, you've provided the labour to the farm initially, and then in time you built up your own cows, and then you supplied cows and labour to a farm where you didn't own the farm, you didn't build a parlour, but you just operated the farms for farm owners.
Yeah, that's right, Paudie, and what we did was make sure that we had a good partnership with the farm owner, so we were very clear on what the owner wanted out of the business relationship, and we were also clear to indicate what we wanted out together, so it is a really good, successful partnership.
So both people would have to be really clear, but I suppose what are the benefits to the farm owner, Kieran? Talk to me about more why someone would be interested in taking on someone in share milking.
I guess somebody taking on a share milker, it's probably because they maybe want to release capital for other projects. So if the share milker brings money in for the cows, that's some capital the owner can take out. Also that level of enthusiasm, you've got somebody, all of us when you're 20 can run a lot faster than when you're 60. So you bring that new level of enthusiasm through into the industry, you'll see great things, I think.
And so you talked about the farm owner not needing capital. So in the Irish situation, that could mean someone actually getting into dairy farming for the first time. So a conversion from beef to dairy and not having to supply the herd of cows, which would make it cheaper to get into dairying and the opportunity to make a better return from the land. So how common is it in New Zealand? Is there many farms doing this?
In terms of share milking, there's probably still about 4,000 farms operate under some kind of share milking arrangement. That's out of about 11,000 farms. So, 40% of New Zealand's milk's created by share milkers, and that's nearly a third of the country's wealth comes from milking cows.
Wow, yeah, Aisling.
Sarah, you mentioned the why, like why you want to go into farming and, life goals. Can you speak a little bit about that?
I guess it's about knowing and having clarity about what you want to achieve in your 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year goals, and taking the steps to achieve those goals. But the most important thing is why you want to do it, because if you're clear in your head in terms of why you want to achieve something, then the how to can be found out or can be learned and can fall into place for you.
And you spoke a little about having to adjust your own goals as well as children come along and so on. What was that like for you?
You absolutely have to be flexible because, yes, you'll get there, but it needn't necessarily be a direct route from A to B. And in terms of children coming along, you just never know what's around the next corner. But it's about working as a team, supporting each other. And sometimes, Kieran was ahead of me in terms of knowing where he wanted to go, and then it's been me having the direction, and it's working together. Make your children part of your goals, especially as they get older, so that you've then got buy-in from them. In New Zealand we do block calving, and so that means for 3 months of the year that they don't see a lot of mum and dad. It's pretty busy and they really have to muck in, but if they know why, then it's a lot easier to coerce them.
And it's probably important to acknowledge, Aisling, that the majority of people share milking in New Zealand is couples. It's not just a farmer on their own, it's actually a couple that decide they want to farm together. And it's probably because they have actually the opportunity to work together. So in Ireland, because the scale of farms is on average maybe a one-man unit, you've had individual farmers working and maybe the partner works off farm, where what's unique about New Zealand, and it's a big strength of it, is where you have the scale that's big enough to allow two people work together, and you've a relationship that's strong enough. That's part of why share milking farms are the most profitable in New Zealand. They're the most productive because they've got really good people and a really good team behind them. So I suppose if there was young people in Ireland thinking about share milking in the future, what would your advice be to them in terms of being successful?
I think probably do some research, and there'll be some aspects of New Zealand share milking you can bring to Ireland that will work really well. There will others that will have to be tailor-made to Irish situations. Find people in the farming arena or any arena that have been successful and pick their brains on what they do, and get some mentors who can help you become a business person, and then start to talk to your farming friends about what opportunities might be available, and start to market yourself with the skills that you have and develop some new skills, and doors will start to open. But again, it comes back to what you want, and once you know what you want, the doors will open.
Thanks very much for talking to me, Paddy and Sarah and Kieran, and you can read more about share milking on farmersjournal.ie and the newspaper as well.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast.
Hi, my name is Ciara Leahy from Irish Country Living, and I'm here with Peter Young, who has a very interesting article this week on social welfare entitlements. So Peter, are there many farmers that could be entitled to money they have not received?
Yes, and the problem is social welfare entitlements are a very complicated area and people don't kind of get it to grips with it. So many times there is different entitlements, be it from when they retire under pensions or under the household benefits, particularly for elderly people.
Yeah, because I was reading in your article that one farmer had received a cheque for €30,000, which is a huge amount. Can you tell me a bit more about his situation?
Yeah, and this situation is Noel Leahy, who works down in Dundrum, helping farmers and helping people with their entitlements, sent me in this. And basically it's a specific situation where this farmer was, born in 1927, and he actually retired, and PRSI entitlements came in 1988, so he actually only paid 5 years before he retired, before he hit 66, and therefore only got half a pension. But what he didn't realise is when his wife died after that in 2009, that he was entitled to a widow's pension, which was the full pension, and it was only when Noel actually found this out, they looked for the arrears, and he got a cheque of €30,000 plus, instead of €115 a week, he's getting €230 a week for every week from now on.
Wow, that is a lot of money. Are there many men in that situation that could be claiming that amount?
I mean, Noel, in this case, he found 2 men in the local area, which meant there could be a lot more men born between 1927 and 1932 for that specific situation.
It's not just men, but women that could potentially claim back entitlements as well. Could you tell me a bit more about women that could claim under the homemaker scheme?
Yeah, the homemaker scheme is when basically you are full-time working at home looking after the children. And the way things are going now, there's different bands for the social welfare pension and for the old age pension contributory when you get it. And if you can get those hours disallowed, up to 20 years disallowed, you can actually average a higher annual contribution, which can get you into a newer band. And what they're finding, this is important to get a higher pension for some women.
And I was reading that another route that some farming families have gone down is to get backdated PRSI contributions where the wife is set up as a partnership retrospectively. So what can be claimed in this situation?
This is where basically the husband and wife were working together, and traditionally all the profits would be put in the husband's name, even though it could have been seen as a partnership. I mean, in those cases, and the IFA have worked with a lot of different families on that, they can actually get a retrospective partnership, pay the PRSI, and then both the husband and the wife are eligible for their own contributory pension.
Right. Now, a lot of these situations that we've just talked about, Peter, are very specific. But you were also writing about, generic schemes such as the household benefit scheme, in which people are not really getting all they're entitled to. It might not be as much money, but it applies to more people.
Yeah, and all this money adds up, particularly, if you are just, on the social welfare and you're depending on it for a living. I mean, things like television licence, the ESB, fuel allowance. A lot of people think they're being cut now so they can't get in. A lot of them are means tested. Some of them aren't. The living alone is not means tested. So really they have to go down through them or get help to go down through them and see which ones are they eligible for. I mean, they have cut them. They've also made it more difficult to get arrears, and you only get 6 months arrears. But I mean, again, at the end of the day, like single farm payment entitlements, it's their right to get them, so they might as well try to get them if they're in a situation where they need them.
Okay, so finally, if there is anybody listening that is thinking, right, I've put this on the back burner, it's something that I really need to get sorted, what advice would you have to them, in order to get the ball rolling?
Well, really to look at what they are due. I mean, the social welfare website has good information, citizens information as well, citizens advice has good information. And as I say, Noel Leahy, he's actually only one in the country to run a private service for this down in Tipperary. We have the details in the journal this week. And, again, I work a little bit with Noel trying to highlight these scenarios where people can get more every week.
And you can sit down with Noel and explain your full situation with him. Okay, Thanks very much, Peter.
The Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast.
So moving on to another article in Irish Country Living this week that's really topical and very timely. It focuses on social media and the effect that it has on students, and it's written by our careers and education reporter Mary Phelan. So Mary, the world of studying has really changed, especially in the last 10 years. Instead of sitting in front of books, students are now studying in front of their computer, or they at least have their smartphones within grabbing distance. So is social media really disrupting student study?
Absolutely, Ciara, 100%. According to studyclicks.ie's annual sentiment index, now studyclicks.ie is an interactive study website, and they surveyed approximately 4,000 students, and they found that 81% of those students were on Facebook, 80% were on Snapchat, 68% were on Instagram, 53% were on Twitter, and 13% were on dating app Tinder. So is it any surprise that when students sit down to study every evening, WhatsApp is binging, Facebook notifications rolling in. So the phone is constantly going off. While there's no hard evidence yet to suggest that exam grades are suffering because the proportion of students taking higher grades is actually increasing as the years go on, there is absolutely no doubt that on a day-to-day basis, the disruption being caused by social media is actually quite serious to study.
But we might have been studying for the Leaving Cert 10, 12 years ago. I mean, there was always distractions. There was always computers, there was the radio, the television. I mean, what's so different about social media?
The thing about social media is that it's instantaneous communication. Somebody is commenting on your Facebook photo, it's probably a compliment. You want to see what they're saying. There's a WhatsApp group going, maybe there's 20 people in it, and it's going off and going off and going off. It has this kind of pull that drags us in, because if you're not involved in that bit of banter, in that conversation, in that WhatsApp group, you're going to miss out, because 20 minutes later when you check it, or an hour later when you have your study finished, the conversation is probably over and the moment has passed.
So it's not like the top 30 hits playing in the background. You know, you're very much involved in the social media.
Exactly.
So it's not just limited to study though, it can also disrupt their sleep, I was reading. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Exactly. So lack of sleep is another thing that's been caused by social media. I mean, really you can say that it's aiding and abetting insomnia, and this is because clinical psychologist, he's a member of the Psychological Society of Ireland, Mark Smith, what he was telling me was that if you're lying in bed at night, you've got WhatsApp open, you've got Facebook Messenger open, you've got Snapchat going, it's like walking into a room where there's 15 televisions showing 15 different channels. He said it's like a disco in your brain. So is it any surprise that it might take you an hour or two to switch off after being engaged in so much communication like that? And the studyclicks.ie survey found that just 27% of first years are falling asleep before 10 o'clock, while almost 1 in 5 sixth years aren't going to sleep until between midnight and 2 a.m. Now, a lot of kids are getting up at 7 a.m. in the morning to get a school bus, so that's absolutely crazy. They're coming into school the next day, they're cranky, they're tired, they can't concentrate. And another point that was made to me by Ornua Hulawan, she's a study skills expert in the Institute of Education, she was saying that even turning on your phone and going on social media during your study breaks is actually not a good idea at all, because you go back to your study and all you're thinking about is that Facebook notification. You're still kind of tuned into that conversation. You can't actually concentrate fully on your studies. So what she was recommending was don't turn on your phone, don't go on social media until you have all your study completed. But then again, don't be going on it too soon before going to bed. But I mean, the thing about it is that social media isn't all bad. And another man that I was talking to, Greg Canty, he's with Fusion Communications, and he actually conducts social media training. He was trying to say, look, social media can also be used. For example, if you're doing Leaving Cert Economics, you should be following the likes of David McWilliams on Twitter. He was suggesting maybe putting essays up on blogs, I guess, so the rest of your class can read them. If somebody got an A1 grade essay, everybody else can have a look at it, and it makes it easier kind of sharing essays and things like that.
But I suppose it's like anything in life, it's all about balance. So here we are, we're 6 weeks out from the Leaving Cert. If you don't have that balance, what advice could you give to students and their parents?
The first thing is, as I was saying, it's not all bad. Another advantage of social media is that it provides another platform where students can kind of, vent their woes, they can get support from other students. But the main point clinical psychologist Mark Smith made in terms of how parents should get involved in this is not to be too judgmental with students and teenagers. So maybe to keep the lines of communication as open as possible. That if students feel they have problems and that they're addicted to it, maybe they feel they can't get off it and they should be spending more time studying, they can approach them with the problem, and then the parent can step in when they're actually needed. The other thing that was suggested both by Lee Kelly, he has a master's in cyberpsychology, and by Greg Canty, again in Fusion Communications, was that a lot of the time the issue parents have with platforms like social media and Facebook particularly is that they don't know how to use it. So at least if a parent knows how to use Facebook, sets up their own Facebook profile, they are familiar with the privacy settings, they're familiar with how it works, they can have more informed conversations with their teenagers. And then finally, just some very practical advice from Lee Kelly again, was that on Google Chrome, for the likes of Facebook, you can set up a timer. So that's if you're using it on a computer. And on your mobile phone, for example, if you don't want to take Orla Hulawan's advice and completely ignore your phone for the 2, 3, 4 hours that you're studying, you could at least turn off the Wi-Fi, you can turn off the data roaming, you can turn off notifications on your apps. So there's lots of little steps you can take, maybe kind of beginning to minimise your use of social media coming up to the exams, and then maybe very much closer to the exams you can start taking Orla Hulawan's advice.
Great, thanks very much, Mary. I think that's very good practical advice.
Thanks, Ciara.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast, online at farmersjournal.ie every Thursday.